Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers, wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Azumullah ujurana wa ujurakum bimusabina bil Husain alayhi salam. In this series, we are exploring the life and legacy of one of the most prominent figures in early Islamic history, Al-Mukhtar al-Thaqafi, who is renowned for taking justice against the killers of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Al-Mukhtar had accomplished that mission. He and his followers had very thoroughly taken care of those who had committed the tremendous atrocities on the day of Ashura, and these criminals had been brought to justice. But Al-Mukhtar's time was limited, and someone whose nickname was the Butcher was sent to put down Al-Mukhtar, and this was Mus'ab ibn Zubair. When Mus'ab ibn Zubair, who was known as the Butcher, arrived, Al-Mukhtar knew that they would be facing serious fighting. He encouraged the people of Kufa. He said, "O people of Kufa, you are the people who back the religion, you support the truth, you defend the oppressed, and you are with the family of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Know, O people of Kufa, that these people who have tyrannized you before have gathered with their own type of people, and they're gathering together other criminals to come and to suppress truth and propagate falsehood. If you are killed, Allah will not be worshipped properly, and the family of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam will be cursed." And indeed we know that was the practice of Bani Umayyah, to curse the family of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So rise up, O people of Kufa, and fight against this man who was known as the Butcher. And so Mus'ab ibn Zubair comes with his army. Perhaps Al-Mukhtar and his followers could have stood against Mus'ab ibn Zubair, except for the fact that the worst thing that could have actually happened. And that is one of the soldiers of Al-Mukhtar committed treason. And the reason he committed treason is he wanted to get rid of the Mawali. And what happened is that this soldier had a number of the Mawali who were fighting on horseback, and he saw an opportunity to kill them, just like that, in cold blood, to kill them, so that they would no longer have this position in society and the nobility would have their privilege again. So he commanded them to get down off of their horses and fight on foot. And of course it's obvious that a soldier fighting on foot is in a much weaker position than a soldier on horseback. This was an obvious tactical error on his part, because it led to the wholesale slaughter of the Mawali and a routing of the army of Al-Mukhtar. And thus the news reached Al-Mukhtar: "The elders of your army have been killed. Wallah, the slaves have been killed. The Mawali have been killed. No, they have been slaughtered to such an extent that there is no precedent for such a massacre. We have never seen anything like this before." And so, as had happened so many times before, many of the companions of Al-Mukhtar fled. They abandoned him, just as some of these people had abandoned Muslim ibn Aqil. They had not stood with Al-Imam Hussein, even Amir al-Mu'mineen. Now, many of them left Al-Mukhtar, some of them barricading themselves in their homes. Al-Mukhtar was still left with 8,000 people. He looked at them and he said, "There is no escape from death." And the person who relates Al-Mukhtar's words from us says that I understood at that point that there would be no backing down for Al-Mukhtar, that if Al-Mukhtar did not win this war against Mus'ab ibn Zubair, he would fight until he was killed. And this indeed was the personality of Al-Mukhtar. He was fearless, he was determined, and he was not going to surrender. He also knew that surrender would mean certain death for all of them. The army of Mus'ab ibn Zubair began to approach closer and closer. The fighting continued until Al-Mukhtar and his followers were laid under siege in the mansion of the government. Their food was cut off. Their water was cut off. For a time, some women whose husbands were trapped in the mansion with them tried to bring them food and water, until Mus'ab ibn Zubair realized what was going on, and then these supplies were cut off too. Time passed. The siege wore on them. They were weakened. Until finally the time came when Al-Mukhtar told his supporters that this is weakening our strength. We cannot continue like this. So let us go out and fight. Let us fight and die with dignity, rather than being trapped inside like this. If you are ready, Allah will help you, but I will never surrender and I will never give my hand. Alas, the supporters of Al-Mukhtar did not stand with him, and he saw this. And so, knowing that his end was near, he did the ritual bath, he did the ritual ghusl, he anointed himself with perfume, and then, with only 19 of his followers, he went out and challenged the forces of Mus'ab ibn Zubair. They told him, "Mukhtar, we demand that you surrender." He said, "No, I will never surrender." And so, this gigantic army attacked Al-Mukhtar, and Al-Mukhtar fell. At that point, the army of Mus'ab ibn Zubair stormed into the mansion. Mukhtar's followers were still there. They were hoping for mercy. They were hoping for leniency. But alas, that is not what they received. Instead, they were rounded up, their hands were tied, and then all of them, thousands of people, they were executed. But that was not the end. Someone then said to Mus'ab ibn Zubair that these Mawali, and these non-Arabs, Al-Mukhtar has raised them up to a position in society that they don't deserve, and it's time now to remove their privilege and put them in their place. And so it's also recorded that Mus'ab ibn Zubair, slaughtered 6,000 of the Mawali on that day to prevent them from retaining their power. He truly was someone who was a butcher. Then Mus'ab ibn Zubair captured the womenfolk of Al-Mukhtar. Now this, of course, was something which was, even according to the pre-Islamic custom, it was not appropriate, it was not honorable to attack someone's women. And he questioned 2 wives of Al-Mukhtar. And he asked one of them, he said, "What is your opinion of Al-Mukhtar?" And she gives him an ambiguous answer. She says to him, "My opinion of him is like yours." I think this is why some of you who've seen the serial about Al-Mukhtar, you see there's a very different characterization of the wives of Al-Mukhtar. She says, "My opinion of him is like yours," and so they let her go. Then Mus'ab asks the other wife, "What is your view of Al-Mukhtar?" And she says, "May Allah bless him, he was a righteous servant of Allah." So Mus'ab ibn Zubair, first he puts her in prison, and he writes to Abdullah ibn Zubair in the Hijaz that Mukhtar's wife actually says he was a prophet. And this is where we get into some of the claims and the fabrications against Al-Mukhtar. We can see one of the sources of it here. And then he dragged this lady, Al-Mukhtar's widow, out of prison in front of her brother, and then he had the executioner strike her 3 times with his sword. So her blood began to flow, she's in her own blood, she's calling out for her father, and then the executioner kills her. And this widow's brother, Al-Mukhtar's brother-in-law, he was furious, and he slaps the executioner. He says, "Look at how you've killed my sister, she's surrounded in her own blood." And Mus'ab ibn Zubair was so ashamed by that he let this man go because of what he had witnessed. All in all, Al-Mukhtar ruled for 1.5 years, and he was 67 years old when he was killed. He accomplished things that many others had tried to do and many people could not even dream of. He was successful in bringing justice to the killers of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. He was successful for a time in bringing more equality to Kufa and the surrounding regions, but unfortunately he was not able to do that long term, and this is still a fight that we must continue. People have described Al-Mukhtar as someone who people were attached to. People liked to follow Al-Mukhtar. He was the best of the people of Kufa, with the best of conduct. They describe him as someone who inspired people to become friends with each other, that he would invariably inspire people to befriend one another. But in the end, his hands and feet were nailed to the mosque of Kufa, Masjid al-Kufa, house of Allah, a house of worship, but a house that has seen so much violence. And ultimately, he was laid to rest near Masjid al-Kufa, where many people come and visit him today. And thus ended the life of Al-Mukhtar, although not his legacy. In the next episodes, we'll be looking at some of the historical controversies about Al-Mukhtar that followed him after his life. Looking forward to seeing you then. Thank you for being with us. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.